Hello everyone, it's Chaplain April and I'm doing video number 2. I'll carry his presence, but I'm going to call this is more about times that I have felt God's presence very strongly. So I had said in my other video that I wanted to share some of those times, and when I wrote down here, I actually have 15 different times that were very well, they're all important, but that really stood out in my life. I think I'm gonna do the top 5. I might add in a couple bonus ones, I don't know, but so there are times what have really stood out for me in my life when I've felt God's presence. So before I start, let's do, my little update that I always do. So last night yesterday was a severe weather day is what they call it here. So we don't usually have tornadoes in February, but because it's not considered tornado season yet, but it depends on the conditions. So if the weather conditions are ripe or exactly right for it, then they will, the weather people will tell you, it's a severe weather day, just be on the lookout for anything can happen type of thing. So you might get hail, you might get this, you might get, you're going to get severe winds, but you might get tornadoes. And so, towards the evening, we started watching the news, and of course, here we go. And what's kind of funny is everybody here watches the weather guys, because we have the severe weather all the time. We always, it's Tornado Alley and all that. And so we have like really, really good weather people here, like these really high-tech, systems that they use to track. So if there are tornadoes possible, they'll put out all these alerts, and there's a warning, there's this. And so there was tornado watches, of course, from the get-go. So last night we're watching the news, and the weather was on, so they'll just cut into any programming. So then you're just stuck watching it, and it's really interesting to watch, because they talk about all these different they have all these terms they use for, the hook echo and this, and it's wrapped in rain. And we're always laughing, the tornado's wrapped in rain and no one can see it. And, it's just all these terms. It's really funny. And one of the weather guys, he is just so hick. He will come up with the funniest things. You just have never heard anyone say this stuff before. And these tracking systems. So if there is a possible tornado, these weather tracking systems will pick up where the spinning is. And so they'll know, okay, so this area, so it's like, kind of where things are, but on a day like that, where a tornado can pop up anywhere, so you don't know. It could pop up near you, so what's cool is these tracking systems, they pick up on the wind speeds and, all the things. And so we were watching it, and it depends on where the storm systems are, and there were like several different storm systems kind of around. And so that's the problem that we have because we don't have any mountains or hills here, so everything is it's why it's Tornado Alley. We're tracking these different systems. So then I was like, oh, is it really going to be bad? Because sometimes you just don't know. And we're like, oh yeah, there is this big system over here, then there's another storm system over here, and there's this one. So there ended up being like, I think 8 tornadoes total that they were tracking. So it's really difficult, because they know they know when it starts, and especially if it's at night, they can't always see exactly where it's going. So now they have all these storm chasers that go out. They send these guys out. They're literally chasing the storm. They're chasing the tornado. They're chasing, they're in it. They're like really, really close. Hey, what do you see over here? And this, and it's this whole thing, it's a whole science. So with a tornado, it's unpredictable, because They can pop up anywhere, and then you don't know how long they're going to last. And you know, if it pops up out in a field, that's good, because it's not going to hurt anybody. It's just going to, you know, kind of dissipate out in the field, or it might take down trees or something. But if it's near the town, so that's when they get really serious. They're like, okay, it's near this town. You guys need to go into your shelter, or go in, you know, to a safe place. And then you'll be looking, and oh, there's another one over here. There's another town here. They're warning these people. So then it becomes a warning. And if it's a tornado warning, then there is danger somewhere near you. So last night we were under a tornado warning a couple of times. There was one tornado that was supposedly coming up this Lake Hefner, which is near us. It was on a straight route to us. So they'll tell you by, you know, 9:52 it's going to be here, 9:54 it'll be here. So you kind of know, you know, to take cover, but they don't know what the tornado is going to do. It could turn on a dime, you know, it could go up and come back down, or sometimes it crosses roads. It's really crazy. So they were showing like, oh, it's crossing the road here, and these people driving, they don't even know the tornado's coming. And so my friend that lives in another town, I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot, she doesn't have cable. I bet they don't even know. They probably know there's severe weather, but they don't know that there's some tornadoes that have been spotted on the ground already. And one of them was like 20 miles from my friend. So I called her and I said, there's a tornado on the ground. It's you know, it's in another town, but it's coming your way. Sure enough, about 3 minutes later, her sirens went off. Tornado siren went off. Then our tornado siren went off. We're like 20 minutes from her. But with a tornado, if it's on track, so they'll tell you where it's going. So if it's on track to go your way, but it's still 20 miles away, well, that doesn't mean 20 minutes. That could mean 5 minutes, because these storm systems are going so fast, and the tornado can come so fast. So literally from when I called her to when her siren went off was like 3 minutes. And so they were all in the bathroom, and then, you know, we were watching the news, so we kind of knew there was one that was it was coming our way. And I'm like, oh shoot. So I'm praying, and then my son calls me, I'm in the bathroom, you know, 2 of us are in the bathroom, what is going on? I said, well, I think there's one that is kind of headed this way, but you just have to wait, because you don't know. And sure enough, that one kind of dissipated, and it's a mess. So our sirens went off, and our siren went off again. Our sirens went off twice. And we don't have so if a siren goes off, so if you're in a warning, you know it's critical. And then if the siren goes off, you better take cover. So we don't have a tornado shelter at our house. We probably need to put one in, but so they say if you don't have one, you go into the interiormost you know, secure room of your house. So somewhere with no windows, you know, that's kind of in the middle of your house. So if it takes off part of your house, anyway, this whole thing. So, but when there's that many going on at once, it's even hard for the weathermen to like tell you everything that's going on, you know. So it's crazy. I would prefer not to have earthquakes. So when I lived in Costa Rica, there was a lot of earthquakes, because there's 7 active volcanoes. There's a lot of inactive ones. I don't know, there might be 100 volcanoes there, but there's 7 active ones. So it was always tremoring and stuff there. And to me, you can't track an earthquake. You can't track a tornado. Anyway, let's go on to the next thing. So that was my night last night. Let's see. I got this little mug that my sister gave me for Christmas. She got this for all the sisters. And this is the 4 of us right here with our names. And it says, side by side or miles apart, sisters are always close at heart. So here we are, even though we all live away from each other now. we're still together in heart, I guess it is. So anyway, and then I have these bracelets. When I went to my sister's house in Indiana, we went to this spa thing, and we, you know, I think we had facials is what we did. And then in there they have all this stuff you can buy, and I was looking at some of the Brighton jewelry, and she said, well, we have that, but we also have Ronaldo. And I said, never heard of that. So she told me about this line. It's called Ronaldo jewelry, and all of the pieces are handmade. And the company, I guess, is a devout religious company, because all of the pieces have these religious names. Okay, so this ring is called the Power of Prayer. So not just a prayer ring, you know, it's called the Power of Prayer. So of course I had to have that. And then this is called the Trinity. So you have the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit here. This one with the cross is called Jesus Loves Me. So they have all of these really cool bracelets that you can stack, and the real pretty stackable ones. I don't have any of those yet, but I am so into this Ronaldo jewelry now. So I tell my family I'm pretty easy to buy for. If you don't know what to buy me, just go with jewelry. You can't go wrong with jewelry, because I'm such a jewelry person. Like this is a really pretty pearl that I have. I've had this for years. And I just, you know, I'm just all about the jewelry. I'm all about the girly things. I love the girly things. But this line, I'm obsessed now. So now I want all the Ronaldo, and they have all these different names for them. So like I will be getting more of that. All right. So so let's get into these times where I felt the strong presence of God. Okay, so let's do my top 5. I'm gonna go, so the 5th one I'm gonna go with, because I know what number 1 is, and that'll probably never change. Number 5, I'm gonna go with, I had that figured out before I started rambling. Now I'm trying to think, what was that? Okay, so number 5, I'm gonna go with singing, worshiping in the car as a child. Because I got saved when I was probably 3 or 4. And my parents would take us to church, and I just felt, I just received God right away. And I felt like I knew him, and he knew me, and he wanted to know me. And so it's funny because I would always go up to receive Christ again. You know, like my son was saying, he prays the sinner's prayer a lot. And I'm like, you don't really have to do that. But when I was real little and my parents took me to church, I did that very same thing. I would go up every week and get saved again, you know, until I realized you don't really have to do that. But so when we became missionaries, we were living in Texas. We were living in Brownsville, Texas. I don't know how we ended up there, because I was born in Oklahoma. I don't know how we ended up, but my parents were missionary type, so who knows. But we're living in Brownsville, Texas, and my mom had gotten an inheritance, and they had bought this house that we had and everything. So when we became missionaries, my parents felt called to the mission field, right? So like a calling. And they had always felt Costa Rica in their hearts. But they also felt Mexico. And so Brownsville was very close to Matamoros, which is like right across the border there. And so we would actually go to Matamoros all the time and buy stuff there. And I love this Mexican cajeta. Oh my gosh. That stuff is so good. Used to eat that when I was a kid. So we would go to Mexico all the time. And then, so when we became missionaries, we actually went to live in Guadalajara for 6 months, because my parents wanted to learn the language. There was a language school there. So my parents gave away this house that my mom had bought with her inheritance money. Gave it away. So there used to be a theology that's how my parents kind of were raised in the faith. Well, they weren't raised in the faith, but that's kind of how that's what they were taught, like in the Bible school and stuff that they went. This is the theology that was out there. And this might be why I am so into theology, because there are so many wrong beliefs. There's so many things that are out there that are not correct, and this is one of them. So unfortunately, I have had to live under some of these incorrect theologies in my life. And this one was like, take up your cross and, leave everything behind and go and serve God. And that's what my parents did. They took it literally. They gave their house away. They signed their house away to a couple. And I remember this. I remember being there. I remember meeting this couple, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're giving our house away and all of our belongings, and like we just gave everything away. And my parents took, I don't know how they bought it, but we bought this little minivan and a trailer, and we packed everything up and we left. And it's like, we left our house behind, we left everything behind. And I remember thinking, well, why don't they rent the house out so we can have income, And it was just, so this whole thing of living by faith, that's a theology that is out there, and that's what my parents did. So living by faith. So now you don't know where your next meal is coming from. You don't know how you're going to pay for gas. I mean, that's kind of how my sister and brother and I grew up. So my little sisters didn't really deal with that, because we had already done all that by the time they came along. But my brother and sister and I, Michael, Christy, and me, we experienced this. And so we itinerated for 3 years in this minivan and trailer, living by faith. And that was just, it was a thing. This is the 70s, was the 80s, because I was born in 72. Well, I was 7 when we left. So it was the end of the 70s into the 80s. It was this whole living by faith thing and giving everything you have. And like, they really did that. My parents really did that. And I never heard the end of this with my mom. She's like, I had a house, that I bought with my inheritance. And I've heard this my whole life, and then she ended up without a house at the end of her life. And that was something that was always painful for her, and so it's like, well, was this theology that we took to heart so much, was that correct? And now that I'm my age, I'm thinking, no, I don't think it was correct. I think their hearts were right, but I think they were taught wrong, because we went through so many hardships from this. And I should actually do a video on that, because there's a lot more that can be said. But I remember, so the reason I said that is because when we were traveling, every single day we were on the road. So we were in the car and we were just traveling. And I just remember, so there wasn't much to do, back then we didn't have iPads and phones, and we didn't have any of that. So we had little board games that we would play in the car, and so we had a lot of music. And I remember the Christian music that we had back then. It was these certain artists, and some of them I still love, like Keith Green. Oh my gosh, this guy's a musical prodigy. He died in a plane crash, like God took him to heaven, back when. His music is still amazing. I would sing that. I would sing Evie, all these songs. And then we had like the Bullfrogs and Butterflies and all this Christian music. And so it was the 8-track tapes. That's what we had. It wasn't even cassette tapes. This is back when we had 8-track tapes. And so I would say, well, can we listen to this or that? And then my parents would put it in and I would sing. And I'm not a singer, I would just sing like to myself, I would just be singing. But I felt the presence of God when I was singing those songs. And I remember I would sit there and I'd look out the window as we were traveling, And I mean just nonstop traveling. Because we were going to churches. So we were going to another church. Sometimes every day we're in another church, we're in another city, or another town. I mean, I have been all over the U.S. My dad used to tell me all the places we'd been, and I'd ask him. Sometimes I couldn't remember where we'd been, and he'd be like, I'd say, oh, have we been to this town or that town? Oh yeah, we drove through there, and he'd tell me the story. So all over. And we went to so many churches. We were in church nonstop all the time. And so we would listen to this music on the way. So I'm going to put that as my number 5 time where I felt the presence of God. And that is just sitting in our little minivan setup and itinerating with my parents and listening to worship music. I would feel God's presence. So what are we going to do for number 4? Because I have 15 here. Let me see. Let me just pick one here. Number 4. So anytime I've been prophesied over many times. Anytime I've ever been prophesied over, I felt God's presence. I mean, you can feel God's presence because God is speaking straight to you in a prophecy. So believing in prophecies means that you're not going to ever believe in a psychic or a psychic word or anything like that. So God gives prophecies. Okay, he doesn't do psychic. He doesn't give psychic words. So those are 2 different things. So God can speak to us through a prophet and give us a prophecy. And so that has happened to me many times. And a lot of times it will say, many times the prophecy will say that I have some kind of writing that I'm going to do or that I'm supposed to do, which I'm doing now. So anytime I was prophesied over, one time specifically, and I remember there was this lady prophet, and she was at this real small church, and people would come to her just to get a prophecy. And I remember my dad took my grandmother there because my mom got saved through my dad. My dad's the one that witnessed to her, and that's how she came to know the Lord. And she was full-blooded German. My grandmother's full-blooded German. She met my granddad while he was in the army, while he was in Germany. And so my dad and his siblings were all born in either Germany or France. And they came here. So my dad actually knew German and French before he ever came to the U.S. He came here when he was 6 years old. And then because of, the persecution and all that, because of the wars in Germany, and they didn't want anyone to really know they were German, I guess. So they just learned English and they left everything else behind. But my grandmother always had that German accent her whole life. What was I saying? Why did I say that? Oh, so she went to get prophesied over, and one of the things that the prophet had told her, which I thought was so precious, is that God had said to her through this prophet, "You are a lily in my garden." And I will never forget that. I thought, that is so beautiful. God literally said to my grandmother, "You are a lily in my garden." And like with a fragrance and, this whole thing that he said to her. And I was just like, God, I want a word like that. She's a lily in your garden. What am I, And so one day my dad took me to get prophesied by the same lady. I don't remember the whole prophecy. I used to have it written down, and I used to have it on tape and all this. I've lost it through the moves and everything. But one of the things that she had said, that the prophet had said to me, now she didn't know that I knew what she had said to my grandmother or anything like that. That was just something I kept to myself, that, oh wow, Lord, I want a word like that. Guess what she tells me? She says, you know what God says about you? And I said, what? She said, he says that you are a jewel in his crown. I said, what? She goes, yes, you're a jewel in his crown. And I can see him like polishing it. And, you know, it's like he's polishing this jewel, and he's like, you know, like breathing on, like shining it. And that was like the fulfillment of hearing that lily in the garden thing. And now I'm a jewel in his crown. I just thought I was going to die and go to heaven right then, you know. But anytime I've been prophesied over, and you feel an anointing, you feel the presence, you know, the whole gamut, you know. But I took a friend with me to get prophesied by her too. And that friend, she was a nurse that had turned chaplain. And so, and that lady didn't know anything about her. And she said, I see you in a nurse's hat. And so, you know, God gives prophecies. So don't fall into psychic or any of that, because that is not of God. All right, so number 3. I'm just trying to pick here because there's so many. All right, so number 3, I'm going to say, was when my mentor and I went to Israel. It was just the two of us. We stayed in this little place right near the Old Jerusalem, right outside the gates of Old Jerusalem. So when we were flying there, we flew on this airline called El Al, and that is actually a Jewish airline. All of the like the native Jews fly on that. So normally an American like me wouldn't know that, and we just find any airline and go. But that's like their airline, that all of the countrymen from Israel, they all fly on that airline. So if you go on that airline, you're surrounded by Jews. You know, they're all Jews on the airline. So when we were in line to get on the plane, they pulled us out of line, because it was like, why are these two American women in this line? Why are they going to Israel? It's a big thing. So Israel has historically been persecuted since its onset. It has been, you know, like, you know, people want to destroy Israel because it's God's chosen land and God's chosen people, God's chosen country. And so they are fiercely protective of it. And so if you are coming into their country, they want to know why you're coming, you know, all this stuff. And I've been to other countries like that where you know, you have to explain everything, but this was next level. They pulled us out of the line. We're just standing up to get to the counter to get on the plane, and they pulled us out. They took us to a separate room. They dumped out everything in our bags. They wanted to know, they looked at every single thing we had. And like, I had a devotion in there. I had, you know, a Bible and this and that. And they grilled us. And they went through all of our things. It was a little bit scary. Like, what? I'm just trying to go, you know, see your country. And I was telling the lady, you know, what we're most interested in is seeing Jesus's footsteps, where Jesus has walked, you know, and it's so crazy to say that to a Jew that lives there. But to them, because the Jews historically do not view Jesus as their Messiah. So they don't really attain to the New Testament, you know, so they don't really study a whole lot about Jesus. For them, it's all about the Old Testament. And they know that a Messiah was coming. They know that Messiah has prophesied to come and all this, but they did not accept Jesus as being that Messiah. So everybody, you know, in Christianity that's real devout and everything, we all know about that. We all want to go to Israel. We want to see where Jesus walked, you know. We want to go down the Via Dolorosa, you know, and all of that. And so I was telling that to the lady that was asking me these questions. I said, you know, wow, we just want to see where Jesus walked and all that. And she was just kind of like, it's just not a thing for them, and they live there. But when you go and you see all these tour buses, it's all these Christians coming there because they want to see all the places in the Bible, a lot of them from the New Testament, right? So Maybe that was the kind of a witness to her, but so we had to like prove of why we want to go there, you know, and they knew where we were going, you know, the place we were staying and everything. It was this huge thing. So when we got on the plane, there were tons of Orthodox Jews just all on the plane, but there were a lot of Hasidic Jews. So Hasidic Jews are the ones that have the little ringlets, and they are a sect of Orthodox Jews. So all Hasidic Jews are Orthodox, but not all Orthodox Jews are Hasidic. So it's a sect, you know, and that's why they have the ringlets, but they do all these things. So they have these little, what do they call these things? They are, well, they're phylacteries. They're these little, I had it pulled up, and of course now I can't find it. What else is new? Oh, here we go. So they are these little black leather boxes, okay? And so they will put those on their head. That has like a leather strap that goes around their head. And inside the box, so they will put them on their head and then sometimes on their arm, I think. Inside the leather box is, it contains scrolls of parchment inscribed with verses from the Torah. So, so the Torah is, in Judaism, is the law of God as revealed to Moses and recorded in the first 5 books of the Hebrew Scriptures, which is also called the Pentateuch. So there's a scroll inside the phylactery with pieces of the Torah. So these Hasidic Jews are very, very, very devout, and they pray at certain times. And I mean, on that is something that impacted me so much from that trip, was just seeing these Hasidic Jews on the plane praying. So they don't care what's happening at a certain time. When it's their time to pray, they stop, they have their talit on, they open their little phylactery, they take out the scroll, or they have a little book, and I mean, they're reading the Torah, they're praying. And I forget how many times a day and whatever they do that, but they do. And I mean, they are like in their own little world. It's like there's like a cubicle around them. There's like an invisible shield around them, and nothing can penetrate. It is so amazing to see. I was so impacted by that. And I'm going to say that I felt God's presence. So Jews are praying to the same God that we are praying in, you know, Christianity, Protestantism, Catholicism, all of those people, we're all praying to the same God. So yeah, I'm going to say I felt God's presence just watching these guys. There was one that was seated like right on the right of us, just a few seats up, and I watched him the whole flight. We're talking a long flight. So once you get to New York, I think the flight is, I think it's 10 hours overnight, something, it's long. And I mean, he would pull out his talit, he would open his little thing, he'd be praying. And one thing that impacted me so much about these Hasidic Jews, I did not even know this, my mentor's the one that explained all this to me. They don't look, because I noticed, I'm like, well, they won't look at you. And she said, no, to them that is, let's see, what did they call it? It's considered immodest for them to look at another woman. So what is so cool is they only think about their wives. So if you ever see Hasidic Jews, the men will all sit together in a circle, and they'll be talking amongst themselves, and they will not be looking around. I watched them once we got to Tel Aviv or wherever we were, and they would not talk to any women and I said to my mentor, I said, so if I went up there to talk to them, she goes, no, you don't do that. That would be very disrespectful. Because this is part of the religion, this is part of what they believe, that they don't want to be tempted in any way. So they weren't even talking to the stewardesses and stuff. It's like the only time they would talk to someone is if it was absolutely necessary. If a stewardess asked them something or whatever, I mean, they won't even look at you. So when you're walking and you're in a line with these Hasidic Jews, if you didn't understand what was going on, you would think they're being rude. They don't even look at you. So what that means is that that's important for them in their belief system and what they believe in their religion. And they're only going to look at their wives. So if you think about it, how cool is that? You know, I mean, that wife has absolutely nothing ever to worry about. He's only going to think about her. They don't even want to be, so it's immodest to look at someone, but then they could also be tempted. So even if someone needed to talk to them that wasn't dressed conservatively or whatever, they may not even talk to them. I mean, it's just this whole thing. I was just like, wow. So I felt the presence whenever this guy was taking his book out and reading. You know, that was amazing. And then when you land, okay, when you land on holy ground, so Israel's land is holy. That is holy ground. And when you get off the plane and your foot touches that holy ground, you feel God's presence in Israel. It's just there. It's there. It's in the air. It's everywhere. It permeates everywhere. And so these Jews, they not just the Hasidic ones, but all of them, they have certain beliefs about how they raise their families and what they teach their children. I mean, it's really special. It's an amazing thing. I mean, I was so touched. They really do it right. They do the whole family thing right. You know, the spouses, they know how to treat each other right. I mean, the divorce rates are, I don't know, very, very low there, because they have certain beliefs of how they treat each other as spouses and how they treat their children and how they teach each other, and they all, you know, now if you're a family member, they will look at you, but someone from the outside, they're not going to make eye contact with you. So it's this whole belief system, and it really is a beautiful thing that impacted me so much. I will never forget that. And just when you're walking around Israel, so you're walking around Jerusalem, you're thinking to yourself, this is where Jesus walked. And you can see the streets and everything where Jesus actually carried the cross. So a lot of people think that via was Via della Rosa, like a rose walk, you know, like walk of roses. No, it was a Via Dolorosa of pain. It was a walk of pain. I mean, he was carrying this heavy cross. He had been whipped and stripped and all these things, and carrying a heavy cross. And not only that, but spiritually carrying all the burdens of the entire world, the sin of the entire world. This was a walk of pain. This is the pain that Christ carried for us. This is what he went through. So a lot of people would say, and even some Jews would say, well, a lot of people were crucified, because I had gone to a synagogue one time in my classes, and I had asked this, you know, Jew, why don't you believe in Jesus? And he's like, well, a lot of people were crucified. And that is true. A lot of people were crucified, but they didn't take on the sins of the world. You know, Christ was innocent, and he took on the burdens and the sins and the pain of the entire world. So that's the difference that Jesus did. So that's why we want to see where he walked. That's why I want to see where he took the cross, all the way up to Golgotha, you know, where he was crucified up there on the hill. And so that's bringing me to my number one, okay? So we're in Israel, right? You can feel the presence just in Israel, just there, and there in Jerusalem too. So I am going to, so we have to go to Greece now. So my number two, I think, well, shoot. Okay, I'll give you a bonus one. Number two was when I was in Greece. And what is really so cool to me, okay, so the Bible's written in Greek and in Hebrew and Greek. So I have now heard people speak in both of those languages. So it was really neat to be in Greece and hear people speaking in Greece. And then it was really neat to be in Israel and hear people speaking in Hebrew. And these are the two languages of the Bible, right? And so now I have heard both of those. But in one of my other videos, I had said how we went to Meteora, which is a monastery. It's a living monastery where there are working monks. Like these monks are working there, doing their thing. It was really cool. They had these cables like from the top of the monastery to another rock. The monks would just like hang on this cable and like ride down to the other rock. It was just incredible. One of the most incredible things that I have ever seen was the iconography inside that monastery. You're not allowed to take pictures, but oh my gosh, one of the most magnificent things I have ever seen in my entire life. Like I have a couple icons here. Oh, they're over there. Well, I guess I could bring one. Let me see. So I have 3 or 4 of these. This one I think I got when I was in Greece. It has a little certificate on the back and it'll tell you. So this is, you know, the ascension where Jesus ascended to heaven. So that's what this one is. This one, I got one of them because I think I got one of them in Italy and I got one in Greece, and then I have one from, I don't know where I've gotten them all. I can't even remember, but here's another one. So iconography, it's not really considered art. You're not supposed to call it art. It's just, it's an image of that person. So these are saints. So it's supposed to be the exact image. So if you can imagine, inside the monastery, in the church area where there's a sanctuary in there, it is wall to wall iconography. Wall to wall iconography. It's kind of like when you're in the Sistine Chapel, because we went to the Sistine Chapel, so you know the ceilings and everything have this gold like that. It's incredible. But this is wall-to-wall iconography. It was one of the most spectacular things I have ever seen in my entire life. I wish I had a picture of it. So I think I did find a photo online. There's very few photos because it's not allowed in there. So on that trip, we had to take a lot of buses because we were in Athens, but then we took buses all over, and we took a bus to that Meteora and all that. So one time on the bus, this is going to be my number 3. My number 3? Yeah. Or my number 2. I don't even know what number we're on right now. So one time I fell asleep on the bus, and there's all these devout Christians. So I was getting to know all these people. One time I was sitting like right in the aisle, and you know, we were just all talking and everything was so peaceful. I couldn't even stay awake. And sometimes my mentor would tell me, when you feel that peace like that, then that means that it's like God's presence is there and you're just so relaxed. And that's how I felt in that moment. So I just like, and I'm not a napper. I'm not someone that naps, but they did have us like on this tight schedule there and doing all this stuff. And then I felt that peace and I just fell asleep. And then I started waking up, but I thought I was dreaming. And all of these people on the bus, this whole group of us that had been talking, they were all speaking in tongues. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, that is so amazing. And I remember thinking, am I like going to heaven right now? Or am I in heaven right now? And I was kind of waking up. And then they were just speaking in tongues. It was so beautiful. It was sweet. It was precious. It was soft. And it was like everyone was just in unison. I felt the presence of God so strongly that day. I will never forget it. It was like the most secure feeling I've ever had in my entire life, was waking up and hearing all those people speaking in tongues. So we're going to have to do a video on speaking in tongues, because a lot of people don't believe in it, which is a shame, because it's one of the most powerful things you can do as a Christian. I'd say communion is probably the top number one thing you can do. Speaking in tongues is maybe a smidge under that. It's an amazing, powerful tool of the Spirit that you can use. And the sweetness, it was like the atmosphere, it was just so sweet and peaceful and precious. I mean, I will absolutely never forget that moment. And it only lasted for maybe another 5 minutes when I woke up and they were speaking in tongues. And then, somebody started talking. But it was, I can feel it now. I can feel it now. So my number one, because now we're at 51 minutes already. My number one is also in Israel. So there are so many places in Israel that you can go. Okay, so we could see, so the Eastern Gate is there. The Eastern Gate is where Jesus is going to come back to. Okay, I mean, there's so many things there. It is mind-blowing. You need days and days and days to go see everything that's going on in Israel. Okay, the Wailing Wall. So there we have our bonus spiritual thing, because you cannot go to the Wailing Wall and not feel God's presence. That's where everyone goes to pray, and you put your little prayer into the rocks there. You put your prayer in there. I absolutely can feel God's presence there. But this is my number one most powerful, I would say the absolute most powerful place I have ever been. It's a church called Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And what is the Holy Sepulchre? It is where, so Saint, let's see, who was it? One of the saints' mothers researched all of this and found out where Golgotha is and found out all this stuff. I think was it Saint Catherine? Anyway, she found out that Golgotha was right there. So they built this church around where Jesus was crucified, the exact spot he was crucified. Okay, this is in Old Jerusalem. So they have identified where they believe Jesus's body was actually laid when he came off of the cross. So we need to do a study on the crucifixion, because that whole thing is so powerful. The veil was rent in two and all this when Jesus was crucified. So this is a very, very spiritual thing. So the place where they laid his body, when they took him off the cross, they laid him onto the ground. There's a marble slab there, okay? And it is believed that that's exactly where Jesus' body was laying. When you come close to that slab, you feel, I mean, I'm a feeler. I'm not a seer, but I am a feeler and a knower. I felt the power of God, not just the presence. The power was there. And people take their scarves off and they rub it on this marble, and I did that too. I brought stuff, and I was like, I want to get some of that power of God. This is not a myth. You can feel it. If you're a spiritual at all, you feel it. You get on that marble and you're like, you just want to caress the marble. You just want to be next to it. You just want to touch it. And people would come there and they'd put their hand on there and they'd be praying, and it's just like this really spiritual, amazing, respectful place that there's nowhere else like it on the earth. There's nowhere else like it on the planet, because there's only one place where Jesus's body was laid. And we went back to that church almost daily. I mean, that's the spot that we went to the most, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and that marble slab. So the confusing thing to me is there's also a tomb in there so there's two tombs. There's one that's out in a garden somewhere where people think that's where Jesus' body was laid, but then there's this tomb inside there, and you go down like way down. Like there's all these different places in there. I mean, it's not just one sanctuary. It's just, there's so many things in there. But there's this tomb, and I have a picture of us going into the tomb. So there's just a line of people waiting to go in this tomb too, and it like wraps around, and you go into the tomb, and that's supposedly where Jesus' body was buried, you know. And people bring stuff in there, and I mean, it's amazing. I'll see if I can find some pictures. But that is my number one most powerful thing I have ever experienced in my life, is feeling that marble slab where Jesus's body was laid after he did what he did, because what Jesus did for mankind was actually the most powerful thing that has ever happened on the earth. He laid down his life to redeem us, to redeem mankind. So it was a very powerful spiritual thing that happened in the crucifixion. The veil was torn, there was an earthquake. I mean, this was a very powerful event. And so, you know, his body, after he did all of that and he took on the sin of the world, was laid down right there. So imagine the power that is there. It's so amazing. I'll take that to my grave. It was so amazing. And if I ever go back, that's where I want to go, you know? So I don't even have the words to describe what that was like. I don't even have the words that can tell you what this experience was like. And I have a photo of my mentor putting her hand on the slab. And so people would take their scarves and they'll just rub it on there. It's like they want to take that power with them. They want it with them. I actually need to find that scarf. But I took an item from each of the kids, and I took it with me, and put it on when we went to the tomb, I put it there. So it's like all these items have like that spirit, that presence, that power with them. It's amazing. And I know it sounds so cheesy, like when people do like these prayer handkerchiefs and stuff, and it's like, we're going to pray over the handkerchief, and you know, God's power is going to be on here, or his healing power, his healing touch, or whatever is going to be on the handkerchief. But there is something to that. I experienced it myself. I mean, it is, I believe in that kind of stuff. So I am a charismatic Christian mystic. You know, I believe in all the things. I believe that God is all powerful. So if I believe that God is all powerful, why wouldn't I believe in these things? I believe in that God can do healings, that he does healings, he does miracles. I believe in all the things, all the miracles, all the spiritual stuff, the powerful spiritual stuff. Now it has to be in the Christian way. You know, there's a lot of spiritual stuff that's of the enemy. So you have to have discernment to know the difference between the two. I believe in speaking in tongues. I believe in all of these amazing things that a lot of the saints believed in. They saw them. They saw healings. They saw things. They saw amazing things. And if we're going to believe that God is all powerful, then we need to believe that he is all powerful, and stop putting him in this little box and taking the power away. So there's a scripture that says, let me look it up right now. Let's look up this scripture. So there's a scripture that says 2 Timothy 3:5. New Living Translation. Okay, the NASB. Holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Okay, let's get the whole thing here. This is not working. Let's look at the whole verse. Let's just read verse 1 through 5. But know this, that in the last days grievous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, haughty, railers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, implacable, I don't know that word, slanderers, without self-control, fierce, no lovers of good, traitors, headstrong, puffed up, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. So this is what's happening right now, right? Evil in the last days is what this is called. Holding a form of godliness, but having denied the power thereof. From these also turn away. So I do not want to be someone that has a form of godliness, like this says, and denying the power thereof. So there's a lot of churches, and we are contemplating leaving our church right now because the power is not there. The presence might be there, but the power of God should also be there. The Spirit should be allowed to work and do its thing, and the power of God should be there. So why are we denying the power of God? So I have heard people say that they are closet charismatics. So in other words, they personally believe that these things can happen, but we're not going to preach it. We're not going to put it out there. We're not going to teach our people about this. I'm sorry, but that's not what the Bible tells us to do. It says, don't deny the power thereof. So God is all powerful, and that's one of his attributes. He's all powerful. You know, we talked about in our last video how God is omnipresent, and I did the sovereignty of God video where it's these three amazing things: omniscient, all powerful, and all omnipresent. You know, all that. So why are we denying the power of? Well, you know, miracles happened back when, they don't happen now. Oh, speaking in tongues, you know, that's not a thing. Blah blah blah. All of this. And I'm like, I just want to scream, because we are denying the power thereof. If we want to believe that God can do miracles back in the Bible and he can't do them today, then he's not all powerful. You know, if we believe that God can part a small puddle, but he can't part the Red Sea, that's giving God too much. How could he do that? Then he's not all powerful. You know, if he can do this, and we put him in this little box, we're putting him in this little box where he has no power. We cannot do that. God has all the power, and that's why I want to do studies on Elijah and men like that. So it's not only the Red Sea, but there are so many powerful things that God did in the Bible. Elijah, amazing, powerful man of God. He called down fire from heaven. I mean, God is all powerful. We're not tapping into that power. We are not tapping into it. That's our problem. God's up there like, I got all the power you could ever want, but you're not tapping into it. You don't believe it. So God is not going to show himself where there is unbelief. The only time that he will do that is to prove himself to someone, or, you know, there's maybe specific reasons why God would do that. He would do it in specific instances, and maybe to, what do you call it? You know, in an exception. But for the most part, God is not going to reveal himself and reveal his power to someone that doesn't believe. So whenever I have people that say to me, well, I read the Bible, it didn't mean anything to me, or I didn't get anything out of it, then that tells me that they have unbelief. Because if you don't have belief, so God will not reveal himself to someone with an attitude like that. So yeah, they're going to open the Bible and they're going to read, and it's going to sound like gobbledygook to them. It's not going to sound real. So when you read the Bible, you have to humble yourself, pray, and ask God to reveal himself to you through these scriptures. And it's all about your heart, the state of your heart. So if your heart is all messed up and you are laughing at God, ha ha, what can you say to me through the Bible? It's not going to make any sense. There's not going to be any revelation there. He's not going to open up your eyes to see it. And one of the things that my mentor tells me that is so interesting is that there are actually 7 layers of scriptures. And so most of us only see the first, second layer. I don't know if we even get to the 3rd layer, you know. We're going to see the surface level of the scriptures of what we're reading. It's going to be on the surface. God wants to take us deeper. So you could read one verse one day and it makes sense. You could read it another day and there's another level that comes to you. You could read it and you could read it 3 weeks later when your heart is even more open and you're more ready to receive and you're more ready to understand, and God, and that revelation, your eyes get opened up. So I'm telling you, if you read the scriptures and your heart is not right, your attitude is not right, it's not going to make any sense to you at all. So it's all about, you know, if someone is a sinner and doesn't believe, and then they say to God one day, and you can hear these stories all the time, they say to God one day, because so God has to get people down to the nitty gritty. He has to bring them down so far sometimes in order to be able to speak to them. So you'll hear these stories about someone that was down and out, and they came to the last, you know, the last straw in their life, you know, and there was nothing else they could think. So what they did is they cried out to God and they said, God, if you're real, you know, I will believe in you and reveal yourself to me. And then boom, he does it. But all those years that they were laughing at God and that they weren't paying homage to him and they weren't revering him and they weren't giving him place and they weren't believing in his holiness, he's not going to reveal himself to them. You have to get humble and you have to get into that mode where God can do that work. So God, once you get to that place, then it will be revealed to you. And I think my mentor was talking about it's the rabbis, you know, that get down to these other levels of scripture. I don't even know. I haven't even really studied that, but I am very intrigued by the whole thing. I mean, I'm like, levels of scripture, what level am I at, you know? So, you know, God will reveal himself through the scriptures depending on our heart, on our heart intent and the state of our heart. I'm talking about spiritual and soul, not physical, you know. And so God knows where we are. He knows our heart. He knows, you know, everything. He knows our thoughts, and he knows how sincere we are. It's about your sincerity. If you really want to know God, and you want to know the scriptures, and you want revelation. So here's the thing about revelation. It's not new revelation. So people are like, well, you didn't get revelation because there's no new revelation. Well, I didn't say I got new revelation. I said I got revelation. So the revelations that you get, it's like, so God opens up your eyes to something. That's a revelation to you. It's not saying that it's a new revelation like for the world or whatever. That revelation is already there, but it's now opened up to you. So God will reveal himself through the scriptures. We need to ask for that. I don't know how I got off onto all of this, but that power of God thing has me so riled up right now. I mean, talk about living in his presence. We want to live in his presence. We want to feel God's presence, because why not? I mean, why wouldn't we? But we also want the power of God. We want to believe that God is all powerful and stop putting him in a box, because that's another kind of pet peeve that I have. It's like we are limiting God. God has no limits. If God created this earth and the universe and all the planets and the solar system and the whole thing, what limits does he have? He doesn't have limits. We are limiting him by our belief. Well, I've got to go. I've got people calling me and everything, but take care, guys. I'll see you in the next video.